Hello everybody, welcome back to Screenstars. I'm here today to bring you my review for the 2022 Netflix horror film Choose or Die, a film that is directed by Toby Meekins and it stars Iola Evans, Asa Butterfield, Angela Griffin and the voice of Robert Englund. Yes, Freddy himself. Now the film focuses on a retro video game from the 80s that is discovered by Iola Evans' character in the apartment of her friend Isaac, played by Asa Butterfield. Apparently, it's an old retro game. It comes with a prize if you beat the game. It's like $100,000 prize or something like that. And she's desperate for money for her and her mother, so she decides to try and get this game to work. Like I say, it's an old style game from the 80s. You have to load it up on a tape, all this kind of stuff. And then when she does load it up, it kind of takes over her life and it gives her scenarios and situations that she has to choose or die. So she either has to inflict danger and pain onto others or herself, essentially, in order to survive. So she's got to get through a certain number of levels to get to the end of the game to find out what is going on. Right, what are my thoughts on Choose or Die? Well, I thought this film had an awful lot of potential. I'm of the age where I remember playing games like this in the 80s, you know, like the old tape. I used to have like a Commodore 64. I used to load games up on a cassette. And I used to play like some of those old like text adventures, you know, where you'd press 1 to choose one thing, 2 to choose something else, so on and so forth. And I also used to read a lot of them like choose your own adventure novels when I was a kid as well. So there are aspects of this film that really spoke to me, you know, was quite nostalgic to me. And I thought the setup of the film and maybe the first half of the film was good. And then, for me, it just completely fell apart. It just started really losing my attention from about the halfway point. And the reason for that, well, there's a number of reasons. It just became so unbelievable that I just wasn't buying into it anymore. And it just didn't explain itself particularly well. By the end of this film, you just don't feel that you understand, okay, how is this game doing this? Even though it does go through this process of trying to explain it. But for me, I just was left at the end still scratching my head. I was a bit like, well, I don't really get that. I understand how the film was finished. I understand what this character is going to do now and the potential that she has. But I don't understand how we kind of got there. And that was a real shame for me. So the second half of this film, for me, it just completely fell off a cliff and I just didn't enjoy it at all. And some of the film as well was all kind of played on this computer screen, like this retro computer screen. For example, there's one of the levels, I think it's level 2 that she's on. There's rats in her apartment with her mother, and her mother's like suffering with mental illness and all this kind of stuff. And she rings her up and she says, oh, there's a huge rat in the house. And this is then level 2. So she's got to try and guide her mother through the house to avoid this killer rat. But we don't see any of this. We just hear it all on the phone and we watch it all on the computer screen with her telling her which rooms to go into, what doors to lock, so on and so forth. And it wasn't tension-filled. It wasn't exciting. I would have preferred to have seen it play out in live action, so to speak. And we weren't shown that. We weren't allowed to see that. And to me, it was naff because of it. For example, the level before, she was in a cafe or a restaurant, and then it started playing with her for the first time, and then it used the waitress as the tool to play for. And one of the things was, you know, we saw the waitress like eating some glass and stuff, and it was hard to watch. It was cringy. Now, if we'd have got that consistently through the film, it probably would have had more impact, the film, but we didn't. We got like bits and pieces of, sometimes you were allowed to see stuff, sometimes you weren't allowed to see stuff, so on and so forth. So it was quite unbalanced as well. Sometimes it really had your attention, and other times it was just like, okay, can I see more? And you never really got to see more. Robert Englund, it was nice to I was about to say see him in the film, but he's not in the film. He is actually the voice of this computer game. And they do play on that in a sense of, one of the characters recognises who it is and all this kind of stuff. So that's quite nice. It's quite nice having this, quite menacing voice that you recognise talking over the game. But also as well, doesn't make a lot of sense because this is like a game in the 80s. Now, some of you may not know this, but I played a lot of games in the 80s, and none of them had voice acting because it just didn't exist. So you've got this kind of voiceover in a lot of these games that just made it more unbelievable. So, yeah, really strange end as well, where she has this Eddie Marsden's in the film as well. Marsden, sorry, is in the film. And he appears at the beginning and then right at the end for this kind of face-off, and it's just a really odd ending to the film as well. So, yeah, I mean, it's on Netflix, so, I got Netflix, give it a watch. What are you going to lose? But for me, it was way too unbalanced. Strong start to the film. Second half of the film was... just didn't hit with me. I just think they didn't know how to go beyond a good idea, because that's essentially what we get, a good idea. There's loads of potential here in regards to the prospects that we had for a really interesting, nostalgic, like 80s throwback type story. And it isn't really. And even it's not set in the 80s, by the way. It's set in like modern times, but they're playing like this old retro game. So loads of potential. It didn't deliver, which for me was unfortunate. But there are still some good ideas and a couple of good moments in the film. It's not a complete waste, but I just thought it was really underwhelming for the most part. So I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this review. I'll be back with more reviews and content on the channel very, very soon.